As a former CEO of this amazing charity, I'm proud to stay involved in championing their work and to bring you another chance to see some of the stories you may have missed. Research is a very broad term, and I think most of us would probably admit we don't really know what it means. But without the research community who work tirelessly in the field of cancer in children, there would be no developments in how we treat young people, no new treatments, and no hope for improved survival rates. I hope this video helps to demystify just some of the work we support. And with that in mind, let's talk now to Professor Bruce Morland and find out more. Professor Bruce Morland, thank you for joining us today. Right, we're going to have to start with the basics. What is research fundamentally, and why is it important?
Really good question.
Big question.
It's a big question. Yeah. I guess at its simplest level, research is all about discovering new stuff.
Is that the scientific term?
The technical term, stuff. Yeah. And it can occur at many different levels. I mean, when we talk about research, people often envisage scientists in white lab coats and pipettes and test tubes and all that sort of stuff. Yes, that is research. That's one level of research where we're hopefully finding new discoveries that might tell us something about how a cancer cell works, discovering new drugs, new treatments. It's what we call basic research or laboratory research. But beyond that, there are other levels of research. So a lot of our children also participate in clinical trials. Now, that's also research. That's asking the question about, is this treatment better than the treatment that we've done before? There are also research that just uses a lot of data. So whenever we see patients, we collect a lot of data about the type of cancer that they have. Where do you live? What's your father's occupation? Epidemiological research. And that's about looking for trends to see whether we can find causes of cancer or preventions related to cancer. But each of these research domains has to have a question. To have good research, you need to have a good question. It's not simply a fishing exercise. And so research is all about having a good question and then scientifically working through to prove with as much certainty as you possibly can that what you think is true is actually true.
One of the challenges I find is helping people to understand why funding research is important. And I think a lot of people feel like it's this nebulous thing that doesn't really result in anything. It's too slow. That's the challenge in terms of fundraising to fund research. What would you say to those people?
Well, it couldn't be further from the truth. You know, the improvements that we've seen in children's cancer are directly related to research at all of those different levels that I just spoke about. And so let's give you an example. When I started practicing as a childhood cancer specialist years ago, the cure rate was around about 65-70%. Okay, today we'd be looking more like 80-85%. So even during my relatively short career, in the grand scheme of things, we've nudged the survival rate up. And I can put a lot of those percentage points directly back to new findings and new research. And actually, people have done studies where they've shown that patients who have participated in research studies actually do tend to have better outcomes. So we're forever chipping away at those last few percentage points, and research is the way that we drive that message across and we get those improvements in survival. It's all about, well, not all about, but it's mainly about survival, as you know.
Yeah. What, to your mind, over the last, 5-10 years, is that a fair question, are some of the exciting developments that can give people hope?
Yeah. Well, let me give you a couple of examples. So one of our commonest childhood cancers, leukemia. Back in the day, we filled kids up with lots and lots and lots and lots of chemotherapy, different drugs, different cocktails, quite toxic treatment. That's still somewhat true of today, but we've been able to incorporate some newer novel therapies, the therapies that specifically target the leukemia cell. And I think a good example of that is some of the antibody therapies that are now pretty much in routine use in some types of leukemia, which not only has improved those survival rates, but means that we can actually start to tail back some of the more conventional chemotherapy drugs, which have very significant side effects. So it's always that balance about, yes, we're always wanting to chip away and improve survival, but we're also very conscious about the long-term effects of treatment. And an equally important part of it is trying to reduce those side effects of treatment. So that's leukemia.
Yeah.
I think another example would be one of the solid tumours, which is neuroblastoma. Now, when I first started practicing, the advanced form of neuroblastoma, which is unfortunately quite common, was pretty much regarded as an incurable disease. These days, we would give people a much better chance of cure, 50% plus. So we've gone from virtually 0 to 50% over, say, 20, 30 years. And again, that's been due to a combination of knowing how to use existing treatments better, adding in new treatments, high-dose therapy treatments, and again, antibody therapy has now become a routine part of that. And so it's a very complex treatment program, but we've been able to use all of our clinical trial research to build up knowledge over time, add in new bits of treatment, take some old bits of treatment out. But again, that's resulted in very significant advances in cure rates.
It's incredible, isn't it? Now, you are instrumental in the charity in helping us to decide where our research money goes. What, to your mind, are some of the really hopeful or, the most important areas to be looking at over the next few years?
So there's been a big explosion in what we call molecular medicine over the last 10, 15 years. The ability to look in detail at the DNA that makes up the cancer cell. A lot of cancers are cancers because there are these alterations within the DNA, within the cell. It's extraordinarily complex, but we now have the tools and have had the tools for a while to look in detail at some of those changes. Now, those changes perhaps aren't as apparent in children's cancer as they are in adult cancer, but there are still important changes that are there. And research has been ongoing and continues to be funded by the charity to look in more detail at this molecular side of the cancer cell. And ultimately, that's really trying to identify new therapies that can target those changes and hopefully switch off the cancer process. So a lot of our laboratory research is still focusing on the molecular side of things. I think some of the newer therapies that we're likely to see develop over the next few years will relate to how the body's own immune system can be utilized to destroy the cancer cell. I've already talked to you about leukemia and neuroblastoma antibody therapy being in relative routine practice these days. There are some really exciting new developments. I think the COVID pandemic has taught us a lot about vaccines, and there's a really interesting area of research around whether or not cancer vaccines can be developed using some of the technologies that we had during COVID. CAR T cells is something that's in the press all the time, really exciting producing some astounding results, big successes in some types of leukemia, less successful for reasons that we're not quite sure about in solid tumours, but there's an opportunity there. So I'm really interested in the immune system and how that might be monopolised. And then the charity also is funding the other end of research. I talked about, trying to prevent toxicities or identify toxicities early and help patients cope with their toxicities. So it's not all about front-loading the geeky science stuff and finding new treatments. We're very much funding research through the whole patient journey and beyond.
It's fascinating, and now I'm not going to ask you to sugarcoat promises for me, but listening to you talk, there is so much to be hopeful for. We've come a long way. We've still got a long way to go, but it's looking possible.
Absolutely. As I say, we keep chipping away. We've still got a little way to go. There are some tumour types which we still struggle with. I mean, just taking a broad group of tumours, some of the brain tumours still are a big challenge to us. And so they definitely will demand some new therapies that perhaps we don't even know about yet. But I'm optimistic that we will keep chipping away. It's slow and steady. Making those big advances early on was relatively easy. Chipping away at these last few percentage points is going to be incredibly difficult. But we're still doing it. We're still succeeding. And the funding that we get for research is helping to drive that agenda.
And we will keep...
It's invaluable.
We will keep funding it.
Absolutely.
Thank you for watching. You can find out more on our website, childrenwithcancer.org.uk, and I hope you'll join us again.